welcome to the Visual Storytelling Podcast. My name is Fred Ranger, and I'm so happy that you're joining us today for another inspirational conversation. Today, I have a very special guest right from Nebraska. His name is Dean Hinnant. I think I pronounced it right this time. And he's an American photographer. He's also a writer, and we've
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, man. We were discussing pre-show about a lot of cool things happening in your life. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, so can you walk us through a little bit more on how you became a photographer in the first place and how you found this great art that is visual storytelling?
Yeah. So photography had a couple impressions on me as a kid. Uh, Something that I've shared about with Tyson actually was my great aunt was a photojournalist. She had a pretty big impact on me. Um, there were just moments growing up where whenever we had family get-togethers or gatherings, she would give me a disposable Kodak camera and almost give me like these little assignments of like taking pictures whenever people were gathered. And usually what would happen is by the time the next event or cookout or weekend activity took place, she had already gone to a 24-hour shop and had the scans done and gotten some drugstore prints. So there was a little bit of a soft ritual, I guess, to that growing up. Um, Beyond that, I was always into books. Like I cared more about books than toys or really anything else. So my personality has always kind of gravitated towards those kinds of things. Um, I would say photography didn't really start to have a significant impact in terms of, I guess, my time commitment or the energy I was giving it until probably my early 20s. I had a really special experience to go backpacking for 6 months before college. And I did not come from a family with a lot of disposable income. So getting the chance to do that was a dream. But I also was one of the only people that didn't have a camera. So I came back from that trip, going all over America and then hiking the Camino de Santiago in Spain. And all the pictures I had were like other people's meals, other people's selfies, other people's group photos, and none of my own. And I don't know what that triggered, but sort of that old memory of taking photos as a kid really kicked in. And I was like, I really should be doing this more. And I also just because I love books and, movies and all those things, it kind of lines up anyway. Uh, I wouldn't, it's not like one of those sacred things where ever since I was a, early age, like I was strong with the force or anything like that. It was more like I just knew that there had always been a presence of it in my life. I knew documenting stuff, even in small ways, was important to me. And so that's when it really started to take root. So after that trip, I came back, and the first thing I did was get my own cell phone plan when I went to school, and I got an iPhone. And I remember going to Verizon because you still had to get the Verizon. You still had to get the phone from Verizon. You couldn't get it from AT&T. Um, and yeah, yeah, that's kind of where it went off after that.
That's great. I mean, I love those stories where, just there's something in your life, a moment that you can remember that, there's a little click in your head and you're like, wow, I think I should go back to this. Like, this is something that resonated with me. And here you are today with, full of ideas and a beautiful Instagram feed. I want to talk about that because we are on a show called the Visual Storytelling Podcast. And one of the reasons why, there's many reasons why I wanted to talk to you, but one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you is your style. I mean, this is pure storytelling in all the images that you share there. And I invite everybody to go see the link in the description below because every time I load my Instagram and you post a photo, I kind of know it's you and I kind of know that, it's your style. And I love the fact that it's, I'm from the East Coast in Montreal in the north. You're from, Nebraska in the Midwest. So it really tells a different kind of story that I'm usually telling. So can you walk us through a little bit more on your style and how you develop that storytelling ability in one single frame? Also, I want to commend your editing. Very cool, consistency across the board. So kudos on that. But walk us through the creative process there.
Yeah. So when it comes to building out, I guess, a story and whatnot with the pictures, A lot of my day to day is pretty unscripted. Like with my day job doing project management, I have a pretty significant of my week blocked off. So a lot of my exploration and the time and the energy that I get to spend with photography is heavily dictated by uh, how often that camera is with me. For a while, especially in 2020 and 2021, and even a little bit past that, my camera was on me pretty much at all times. I mean, unless I was going for a run or I was in a shower, like I literally had my camera with me. I used to keep my M6 on top of the like vanity by the sink, even just when I was brushing my teeth or something. I literally just always had it around me. There was there was a period like right during COVID and right after where I just went through a lot personally, and so my interest in photography went from just simply trying to learn how to take photos to it became almost a necessity to have something that gave me like a present mindedness, I guess, by building the kind of habit of not being all out here, but actually just being like right here, right now, in this very moment. There's a lot of content and there's a lot of information, like encouraging people how to do that. But the neat thing about having a camera is it's a very tactile thing. Even if you have a phone, even if you have a touch screen on your phone, it's a small gesture, but it's still a significant thing that you can use. You take a few moments to pause, consider what's going to be in it, or why it should be in there in the first place, or what it's going to say. And to kind of simplify my process, I really focused on a few things. I focused on light, but I also try to focus on the different ways that light showed up. There was a correlation for me, I guess, during that period that started to take shape where I think unconsciously I was associating light with peace, or I was associating it with love, or I was associating it with grace. And that was something that I was looking for. Because I was looking for it, that started to really influence taking photos that didn't have people and where light was much more the subject. As I developed and as my work has kind of developed, uh, I think my interest in light now is really intersecting with actual subjects and actual people and scenarios and settings. And my road trip that I did a few years ago was a pretty big catalyst for that. Um, the effort for that was really to try to kind of see America coming back to life after the pandemic. And I think committing to those sort of attempts and even committing to risks of doing projects like that really solidified uh, sort of democratic style I have to shooting. I know Eggleston was a pretty
Mm,
big name like in that field, and
yeah.
not all of my photography falls into the same sort of frequency or wavelength that he had. I'm not going to compare myself to him, but there is an openness to wanting to just constantly document, regardless of the place and the time and the people that are around, because the ordinary used to be something that felt like a burden.
Mm,
And I think a lot of people will see like their day to day commute or their day job or a lot of things conflict with an aspirational way of living that's often really prominent for us. And even as photographers, like there's a lot of creative brand work that is fantastic, but its purpose is for us to, buy more cameras, buy more gear, all of
yeah.
that. Um, and I think just trying to stay centered on finding like almost a sacredness to everyday life has really been key. So
Mm,
when it comes to editing, I really try to look for that. I have found the more open and the more healed I have become, like as a person, the more vibrant and the more deep the colors are in my work. I can even go back and look like in my feed from years ago, and I can watch this gradual transition where it's like someone is actively moving the slider scale as the months go by, and there's just a vividness now that I really enjoy finding, in moments and in opportunities to photograph things around me.
man, that's so resonating with me what you're saying. I mean, I even have an episode called "Photography is Therapy," and I
Mhm.
truly stand by that. And I posted that episode. I think it was during COVID. You know, we all
Mhm.
went through a bunch of stuff that we were, either not sure about, or we felt isolated, or we felt inspired, depending on the day, depending on what was happening. So I completely agree with you that post pandemic, we all kind of needed something to like recalibrate almost.
Mhm.
And I guess for you, and I will include myself in there, photography was that concrete art of creating, of documenting, and getting out of that routine that was coming back, and that life that was just coming back to quote unquote normal, which
Yeah.
I guess, is it normal with everything that's happening in your country right now, in my country right now? I don't know. Anyways, that's another podcast. That's not our podcast. But Dean, I want to say that editing style, I see it too. Like, man, those colors are so deep, so vibrant. I think it reflects well what you just said of finding your voice, finding your tone, finding your colors. Not just in an image, but in how you tell the story, in your composition, in the light. You did mention a great photographer there, but I also see a lot of, I don't know if you're familiar with Stephen Shore and his work. And I think this is also something that I really resonate with, because you don't have to have the most beautiful thing in front of you, the most beautiful people and mountains and so on. Ordinary life can be quite poetic, can be quite interesting. And I think it was it Joel Meyerowitz or somebody else who said, I want to see something ordinary, but photographed by me. Because some people will say, wow, but everything has been photographed. And I'm sure you'll agree with that. Yeah, but not by Dean Hinnant, and not by Fred Ranger, and not by Joel Meyerowitz. Not that I'm comparing ourselves to Joel, but you know what I
No,
mean, right?
God forbid.
But you know what I mean, right? So
Yeah, I do.
that is so important for young photographers and people who are looking up to you, to other people that have, some sort of voice now. And it took you time, right? It took you to go through some hard stuff, some cool stuff, some inspiring stuff. So I like what you're
Mhm.
saying, that photography is not about the gear. It's not about, a tactic to get there and so on. It's just going through life with that instrument, and basically finding your voice through creating and creating and creating. How long have you been shooting, Dean?
So I started fiddling around with that iPhone around 2014,
Okay.
2015,
Yeah.
give or take. So if you want to start it around that point, I would say about 9 to 10 years.
Nice.
Yeah.
And yeah, so this is again just a great example of how long it can take to. And I'm sure you're definitely not done. You're just getting started, but it took you almost 10 years to get to a point where you say, you know what? I kind of know how I want to tell the story. I kind of know what colors I want to go with and so on. So yeah, it just shows how photography is hard work. It's not just getting the latest and greatest technology in your hand and just use it. So I want to go,
No.
yeah, I want to go back to that art side of things. So for you, having you mentioned a day job, and having that photography side of you, how do you go from one to the other? I know it's hard because you're in one mindset, and then you go out, and then so do you go out at lunch, or do you reserve time during your week to do that? By the way, a lot of our listeners, including myself, photography is a major thing in their life, but it's not the only thing in their life. So how do you manage on your side?
So I am malicious with time blocking. For me, I can't schedule taking photos. My style and method and how I enjoy experiencing life is not through a type A calendar, line by line, minute by minute agenda. So I take that portion of myself uh, and I essentially structure my week around maximizing that. So instead of trying to force myself to be a type A manager of my creativity and my creative time and all of that, I will skip lunch. I will pre-make things before I go to work so I don't have to drive anywhere to get it. I actually have cut out purchasing coffee to and from work, like Monday through
In
Friday. This
in
is such
favor
an
of purchasing Portra 400, or was it that?
yeah. Oh well, yeah. I mean, we'll get to camera gear in a
Yes,
little
yes,
bit
yes. Of
because
course.
because I've had a reason saving for the past few years. But yeah, there's a piece of me that because I manage contracts and I'm managing budgets and all of these things every day. Like if I wake up at 4 a.m. and I have my usual morning routine, uh, a quick commute to work, give or take 30 minutes. I'm in the office around 6 a.m. usually, and I'm usually there to tee up 30 to 45 minutes of solid work before my team shows up. Uh, for context, even though this winter has been sort of a bear for getting out and getting to document stuff the way that I wanted, I also had over 90 projects that I was managing simultaneously
Whoa.
at my job. And so there is a piece to me that almost sees it as a challenge to take all of that and to condense it and consolidate it into 40 hours
Yeah.
and to keep it as close as I can to that. Uh, and it's actually worked very well. It's given me the chance to really take some great weekends to travel and see different parts of the Midwest. It's given me the really kind of, I would say, the privilege actually to take off and go someplace like Colorado and not be concerned about buying film because I've structured so much outside of it that a lot of, I guess, the system in place for giving me the ability to say yes to an impromptu idea really comes from how I guess I've built my life around that. I will say, I don't have kids,
Hmm.
so that is also a piece that I don't have to manage and navigate. I am the oldest of six kids, so I also know deeply how much energy being a parent and even having a family can take. So, to anybody listening, I'm not going to pretend to say that I have the exact same, I guess, task at hand to try to fit it in with that. But having said those things, I do think for the life that I do have, it's been really great. It also has given me the chance to be a lot more exploratory and be a lot more okay with taking the time to sort of consolidate what I want to make, why I want to make it, how I want to do that. The pressure of trying to turn around a campaign or turn around assets every month or so, that's something I do 40 hours a week, and I do that with multi-million dollar contracts. I do that with very sensitive information, very large scale systems that are very separate from photography. So I do, avoid the burden of being in freelance and having that sort of feast or famine. But I also have pretty high expectations at my day job that I have to match just for my track and like my career. And hitting those while also being able to document life well, it's kind of stunned me that I can do both actually.
Yeah.
Um, it still surprises me some days.
Well, sometimes when we're very passionate about something, we do find the time. And I can definitely relate to your comment about having kids. I have a job, kids, a passion for photography and music, by the way. I just keep piling up. But I can totally relate to what you're saying. What I do like about your approach, and that I think a lot of people can apply, is that, there's two compartment, if I can say, in your life, and one is very analytical and one is very focused on delivering tasks. And when you go back, you switch your brain, quote unquote, to the photography one, you are a creator. You're not that guy who looks at numbers and crunch numbers and so on and so forth, although you use the skill in one and I guess in the other to feed your performance or your creativity at the end of the day. Because
Mhm.
being organized and understanding how it works to deliver something concrete, because you can be dreaming about an image, but if you don't take action, if you don't plan anything, and to your point, if you don't manage up or manage before going to the location, then it can become just a dream, just something you thought about. So I like your approach there, but I like the fact that you're leaving a lot of room for creativity in your life, even if you're a busy guy with work. You did mention something about gear. I mean, you're sparing a nice hat right now, and some people cannot see it because it's an audio show. But my friend Dean has a Leica hat. I have a Leica camera right here. I have another one there. Anyways, I think we're Leica fans on this show. It's starting to become a theme. Although I interview a bunch of people that shoot whatever brands, and I love them all. But we actually exchanged a couple messages online because you happened to see my post about my Leicas and I happened to see yours. What was the journey there? And I know it sounds a bit cheesy when we talk about Leica because, there's always the Leica haters and they think we're rich guys that, just spend our money like we spend on cars and stuff. But that's not the case. So walk me through your thinking behind getting your first Leica. And I think you made a big decision recently that we discussed on via Instagram. But what was it all about?
So I've been shooting Leica since the end of 2019. I used to work at a camera shop. At that camera shop, and even before it, during college and other seasons of life, I got pretty much the chance to shoot every system except for if you want to be really granular in particular, like Phase One or Hasselblad or
Mm.
Alpha. If you want to get super niche, but all of the big names: Sony, Pentax, Nikon, Fuji, Canon, anything that you would see at a Best Buy or in a retail context, being in the gear shop gave me the chance to either work with it or people that I knew, friends that I had, photographers that I knew in college. We always gave each other the chance to try different systems, work with different files. Growing up, my parents really couldn't afford daycare. And because of that, I went to work with my mom. She was a paralegal at a law firm, and my grandparents were at that law firm. So my granddad, I don't know if it was a Nat Geo subscription or if he just bought the new copy every month in Barnes and Noble, but he always had National Geographic magazines. And so I would just pour over those things because I had like nothing to do. Like every summer until I think I was around 8, like I was just inside reading books. Um, so Leica, like as a whole, it contained a little bit of mysticism for me. I think a lot of people, if they cut their teeth on Instagram like I did, remember seeing that camera get pretty prominent and popular. But I had already been kind of familiar with Leica as a company. They make a lot of hunting and sporting optics as well, so I knew those existed. I knew my granddad was always a big fan of nice optics and binoculars and whatnot. So there was already just kind of trace, I guess, experiences with it when I was younger. But I knew that I wanted to shoot film. In 2019, I was very explicit about the fact that I wanted to shoot film. I knew there were a lot of people doomsaying and soothsaying that film was going to go away, that it was finally going to die this time. It was actually going to be the last Star Wars movie. The Emperor will be dead for good. But no, I mean that hasn't happened. But at that time, I definitely wanted to get a film camera that was going to last, and I knew I wanted something mechanical, and I also knew that I wanted a rangefinder because I would read Street Photography magazine, and I would watch these older documentaries that had people like Meyerowitz and um, even seeing movies like Walter Mitty and other just very cinematic things. There was, I would say, a pretty heavy romanticism and nostalgia tethered to shooting with that. But growing up with very little disposable income, coming from a family with a lot of mouths to feed, my dad was always more of an advocate of you buy something nice once than buying it multiple times. Because even if we got something handed down to us, it was usually something that was like name brand or something that would hold up well. So that analytical piece of my head went to work in college. And I really settled on Leica as a company that I knew long term I wanted to have gear from, not just because of the fact that it's reputable or because it's quality, but I knew that it was the kind of system that I could buy, and until the sensor basically fell out of it, it probably wouldn't need to be replaced again. I also really enjoyed the fact that all of their optics could be used
Yeah.
across the different bodies. I loved that. Um, I come from a background of historic preservation work, like even before project management. That's what I spent most of my 20s doing to pay for college, was working in historic masonry. And so old things standing the test of time has just been hardwired into me. That's just something that appeals to me as a person, and just with my personality and demeanor. And even in being in Virginia, like there's a bunch of old things still around that have been around for centuries. And that's always interested me, things that can, for better or for worse, stick around, uh, regardless of history, time, aging, all of that. Um, all that to be said, I knew that I wanted an M6, and the reason I settled on an M6 was, one, because at the light meter, and two, I knew that it was a camera that if it really broke, I would still be able to get it fixed, just
Hmm.
because of the fact that several parts of it were mechanical. I also knew that if I was only going to be able to shoot film for a few years, I really didn't want a different system to shoot it with. Uh, I think it sounds very generic, but if someone says the word midlife crisis, you immediately think of a sports car, um, and that's weird. But if you think about somebody who, if they had to pick a lifetime camera to have, I'm sure you would get a mixed bag of answers, but the majority would probably be a camera that has some heritage and has some culture and has some weight behind it. And the nail in the coffin for me was just kind of the story of Leica and how it kind of came to be. Um, Hearing about how the first camera got invented and how the pocket camera got made, eventually hearing about how they, hid people during the Holocaust, like just incredible things long term, regardless of what version of lens is better or not. Like the company has, for better or for worse, retained a lot of value in those kinds of stories. So I ended up getting an M6. It was something I was saving for, but it ended up being a gift from my parents. There was a guy who gave it to me for what he paid, years prior. So it was a fraction of what they were going for in 2019. Um, but it was the last thing they gave me before they separated.
Wow.
So it has some emotional weight
Mm.
to me. It feels like a family artifact.
Yeah.
Like the more I hold it, the closer my family is together again, even though
Wow.
it's not.
Yeah.
Um, the big purchase I made recently, though,
Hmm.
is an M11, and that is something that I have been eyeing for a very long time. Um, I had a Fuji X-T4 for the past few years, and that's been a great digital body to use for a lot of different situations. But I knew I wanted to consolidate. I knew after spending a few years working with the M system that it was so easy to focus and preset and to shoot with at that point. It didn't really make a lot of sense to buy a digital version of a different system. Uh, so I knew that I wanted that. And I actually, we were talking a little bit at the beginning of the show. The the role that I'm in now is something that I accepted in June of 2022. So I'm coming up on my 3-year mark, and I'm soon going to be moving into a higher level role. But the M11 that I got, I was looking at the notes from the factory, and it left the factory in June of 2022, almost to the date
Nice.
of my work anniversary. And it's so funny, it's ironic, but I kept an M11 as my desktop screensaver for the past 3 years, waiting to get this camera. Um, like I was talking about earlier, like I reduced like buying coffee. I stopped going out to lunch. I didn't Uber anywhere. I mean, I just went full tilt in budget mode, just thinking, okay, if I do this, then it's really just a matter of compounding value. At
Yeah.
some point, I'm going to hit the spot where I can get one of these, and it worked.
Mm.
So I'm very fortunate. Um, I know it sounds cocky to say, but a lot of things that I've wanted in life, if I wanted them, I really I really have had to take the self-made approach.
Hmm.
Um, and for better or for worse, I think the easy answer is we would like to avoid that. But I think there's a lot more value in the gear that I have for me personally, just knowing some of the backstory to them, why I have them and um, kind of how they came into my possession. So,
Yeah, this is totally why gear actually matters, but not for the reasons that the online community or the brands themselves would like you to think they do matter. So I think at the end of the day, if the piece that you hold in your hand actually makes you feel something, just as our photographs are making people and ourselves feel something, that's a good camera. And by the way,
mhm.
any camera from the past, I'm used to saying 5 years, but I think I'm going to go 10 years. It's pretty darn good. You worked at a camera shop, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
it's not the camera, it's you. It's probably you. If you suck at photography, I'm sorry to report. Shoot more. But I truly relate to what you're saying. I mean, having an M6, a TTL M6, and an M11, uh, that seamless switch from analog to digital is I haven't seen it anywhere else. I mean, there's no other brands. I think Pentax have some like recent film cameras,
Mhm.
but it's not. I mean, there's no equivalent on the digital side. Um, and those lenses, to your point, I mean, I think like us about the lenses. I mean, Ernest Lights was pretty darn good at miniaturizing the camera and doing stuff, but the lenses engineers were the most brilliant on the planet. I would say, like this is
Mhm.
those lenses to this date. There's some people looking for, I want that 1967 V4 bokeh, whatever, because they were so good and they're still so good today, and they have character and they have something very unique. And you and I are not necessarily product commercial photographer. If we were, maybe we would have gone with a Fuji GFX or a Phase One or a Sony with gazillion megapixel and really clinical sharp lenses. And Leica's not known for video either. I mean, I know the SL2S can do a pretty good job, but there's probably better options. But if your main thing is photography, there's a reason why there's so many people, and even more recently, that are saying, you know what, let me stop paying $2,000 and $3,000 for a camera that I will change in a year or two. And let me grab a camera that I pretty much set for life. Like honestly, between the M6 and the M11, will you really need something else? Probably at some point, because I don't know, the M11 electronics will die or whatever. But you're pretty much set for at least the next 10 years. And for the M6, set for life. I mean, you did mention the family aspect. I'm thinking about giving my M6 to my daughters when I'm no
Mhm.
longer around. So that's how precious and intentional buying this camera in the first place was for me, just as it is for you with the family story. So as soon as you start adding stories to those pieces of gear, those tools, they're no longer tools. There's something that connects with you and that you're creating art with. And that's very powerful, regardless of the, I don't even care how many megapixels or is the shutter speed sound cool. I mean, it's great if the M6 is pretty cool with the shutter speed sound, but don't really care at the end of the day. I don't know if you're with me, but I think the
No,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say I agree.
Yeah.
I've thought a lot about if I get the opportunity to have kids, and even if by happenstance they end up being interested in the arts or something like that, I would love to pass one of them down.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was gonna say to your comments about the design and the lenses and all of that is, you can buy a diamond ring anywhere.
Hmm.
Diamonds themselves are not sacred things, but the act of cutting them, the act of making them, the craftsmanship that goes into something, it it's weird because I think in a lot of ways people associate something natural being more valuable than something man-made. But there are times and there are things that regardless of their price, regardless of the scarcity, regardless of how unattainable they feel, to people's budgets, you can't help but respect the energy that went into designing something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Um, and I totally understand, Leica being a company that has a lot of cost associated with its items, but truthfully, even with the fact that my M6 was something that was a gift, um, I mean, what it was purchased for literally was a fraction, and I mean an actual fraction
Mm,
of any new Fuji GFX or even the Fuji X-T5. Uh,
yeah.
it's less than most Sony lenses that you could probably pick up today. Um, the cost of gear is something that I think toys with people emotionally, because when you see cost of gear for something that is built around the idea of something being iconic, it tends to stick out more and resonate more,
Yeah.
because deep down, um, we are people that are drawn to story. We are drawn to narrative. We are drawn to a connection, to something before us, like we're a continuance of it. And I think Leica does that very well. And I think that the reason they do it well is because of their community initiatives.
Hmm.
I mean, compared to any other brand out there, having a Leica or even wearing this hat, I've been in airports and people have walked up to me and
Yeah.
just been like, Which one do you have?" And it's just instant.
Yeah.
There's just a camaraderie and a sort of a global friendship or kinship that you can have. Um, just being a participant in what Leica is trying to do. So,
Yeah, it's because also, I mean, you talked. I have a friend who worked at who works at and he's a photographer too. Like it's
mhm,
by photographers for photographers, passionate about storytelling, passionate about art, and they don't even care what you shoot. I mean, they do exhibitions with people who shoot all brands, and they don't care. So I think
mhm,
one of the winners of the Oscar Bernac in the past 2-3 years was not even shooting Leica. I think now he shoots Leica.
yep,
He got a brand new Leica. But yeah, to your point, and you look at what they do with Jason Roman and so on and so forth. Like that's just encouraging the
mhm,
community to create more art and to communicate. And yes, they are a brand. And yes, they need to make money, which they do. This is a good news for all the Leica lovers, because there was a time when they almost went bankrupt because they
mhm.
weren't fast enough to go from film to digital, and they had the M7, which was an interesting camera, which didn't sell well, and so on. So at the end of the day, you have to respect, to your point, the craftsmanship, the fact that they still in 2025 are assembling those cameras in Germany and in Portugal, and those lenses by hand. So the thing you have in your hand, there's a couple people who touched it, who assembled it, and yes, there's a cost to it. It's not a robot in a China factory. It is what it is at the end of the day. Speaking of China, this is a very weird segue, but location. You are in a very unique location, and just by looking at your photos, I mean, you are capturing so many cool images that represents where you live, where you basically connect with people. So, how is being in Nebraska has brought a certain narrative, a certain aspect to your storytelling, and on the contrary, when you look, because online it's all about New York, LA, and all these cool, and then you have Matt Day and you that are in very very I would say quote unquote remote location. How is
Mhm.
that influencing your photography at the end of the day?
So, uh, I was in Missouri for a few years prior to this location in Nebraska, or in the Lincoln and Omaha area. And I had visited Nebraska prior. It's a state that is notorious for being boring. There is a lot of prairie. It's very open, and coming from the East Coast, I can never say that there was a time where I expected to live in the Midwest. I growing up, I always knew. I mean, even just from an early age, I was curious enough. Like I couldn't turn my head off. I knew that I was going to travel. Like I always knew I was going to have a place where I would go and I would come back and I would be transient. There's a part of me that's very beatnik in that regard, and oddly enough, I'm almost attracted to places that aren't the center of it all. As much
Yeah.
as I enjoy places like New York, I just came back from a trip to New York, and it was really nice. It was like a palate cleanser, getting the chance to just be in a place that high energy. And it really helped kind of refine my perspective for what I'm doing out here. Mostly because uh, I have not lived in one place my entire life, and so the depth of what I photograph, the value of what I photograph, has never really been dictated by being, a permanent fixed member of the community every single day in the same house in the same corner. That's never been my context. My context has always been being somebody outside of a place that's new and trying to find the connections, the energy, the moments that actually define that place, that really unpack it. It's almost like a passport in a lot of ways to be able to discover more of something that's been around as long as I have and longer, but I actually get to experience it firsthand. So, because Nebraska is a place pretty opposite from the East Coast, and because it's very opposite from a place like LA or New York, it's fascinating because the photographic camaraderie or community is very narrow.
Mm,
There is some, but predominantly in the Midwest, just as a region, it's mostly wedding photography.
yeah.
There are a few people who are changing that. There are a few folks that are leaning heavily into the artistic side or the fine art side, and they're doing very well. Brian Burks down in St. Louis is someone who
Yes.
um, does remarkable work in various formats, and I really appreciate actually getting to see somebody like him attempt that. It's awesome to see that level of work happen out here with Nebraska as a community. It obviously is got pockets of settlements. There is some history and some architecture and some culture, but a lot of it is based on immigrants. It's a lot of people who moved out here, and then they just stopped moving west. They stayed here, and so you have almost like little boroughs in different towns, with a lot of people who have had relatives there for generations. But a lot of those people, they either married into the family or they came from the East Coast. And so for a place that doesn't have a lot, it's actually a very rich and culturally interesting place.
Mm,
Um, it's got some depth to it. And in a lot of ways, the simplicity of the landscape really helps bring out the character to what's here. You don't really get a lot of large national parks like Yosemite or things like the Adirondack Mountains to kind of pull you away, and distance you from everyone. Out here, it's more like the distance is pretty much in between everything, and
mm.
then what you actually find as you pass by that are people. Are pockets of life, pockets of living community, and that's something that I won't lie has been a little bit difficult to make like deep friendships with, but I am making headway. Slower than I expected, but it is happening. So um, I think how that influences my photography a lot is I don't find myself when I leave to go photograph itching to find like a specific frame
Mm.
in my mind. I don't leave with like a clear picture of I need to go find this and then go basically geocaching for that, subconsciously. On the East Coast, I could do that because there's so much density and population and everything. There's so many places to do street photography and other things. You could throw a rock anywhere, and hit a photographer or somebody else that's got a camera.
Yeah.
Um, but out here, even with Google Maps and looking into towns or trying to find things close by, it's 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 different. It's much slower paced. It's a lot more calm, and you have to be a lot more patient, I guess, to look for moments that really stand out.
Yeah, man. I love what you say. What you're saying about the fact that quote unquote the landscape is simpler, so it makes the subject, whether it's a person or something in the frame, even more important in the story that you're telling. So to your point, in New York, I mean, you can, to your point your camera anywhere, and there'll be something weird or something interesting happening, or a building or whatever. And I'm looking at one of your photos with a car in front of a window. I think it was taken on the M11. Uh, it's a brown car in front of the window. There's a church in the back. That frame is like very, very interesting. And I think you were mentioning in your post that you started to take your camera out, more on weekends and just, shooting and being open to capturing whatever was unfolding in front of you. And it doesn't have to be a busy scene or something incredible happening. If we go back to our earlier point in the conversation, it can be something that resonates with you. And ultimately, there's definitely other people. We're 8 billion people on this planet. So there's definitely somebody else on the planet that will go like, wow, that's something that resonates with me. I'm doing that right now with that frame. So how do you decide film or digital? Like, do you bring both, or do you, now it's just the M11? How do you decide that?
So I shot film exclusively from 2019. I almost exclusively. I should clarify. Um, I did use my XT for some, but my M6 was almost, like I mentioned, like tethered to me. I mean, I had it everywhere. I even like would have it around my shoulder, like at business dinners, and my coworkers would be like, "Wait, what's that?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's just a camera. Like I had it out." And they're like, "Oh, that's so cool. Like people still have cameras." And I'm like, "Yes, people still have cameras." Um, Several times I would take a photo and sometimes be like, "Yeah, I want to see it." I'm like, "No, it's film."
Yeah,
Like
in 2 weeks.
yeah, I just send it off to my lab, and they're like, "That's exhausting."
Exhausting.
And I'm
And there's
like,
still labs?
"Yeah." I'm like, "No, like scrolling on your phone is exhausting.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Shooting film actually is kind of the opposite. It's like reading. Like, if you give it a chance, you'd be amazed at how relaxing it can be." But but yeah, I shot film almost exclusively the past few years, uh, and my lab, Pro Camera, out in Charlottesville, Virginia. Man, they have been champs, because usually, whenever I do a film order, I'm not developing stuff as I shoot it.
Mm.
I usually do like one trip a year back to the East Coast, and I drop it all off. And that is, I usually give them about 6 weeks notice. Be like, "Hey, this is how many rolls I got, and just go ahead and tell me how much it's going to be now." And then they usually kind of break it out, and they give me a lead time. And last time I brought them like a box of croissants, because there was a bakery nearby. So I brought the film, but I also brought breakfast because I want to make sure like they know I care about the time they're taking. They're
Yeah.
making my life easier. Um, but they also just do amazing work. The team over there is incredible. So if there is a shameless plug, I would highly recommend connecting with the people over there. They're fantastic. Ryan, Madison, all of them know that they're great. Um, and they've just been really big advocates, at least just seeing me be someone who's not a very established voice or not a very established artist, encouraging me not just to keep shooting, because obviously, they're a lab. So, they always want me to keep shooting, but um, they're just very genuine people. And being able to work with like one place over several years and kind of watch my scans and my negatives come back and just develop more character and more clarity and be better time after time, has been great. It's felt almost like a very slow moving um, mentorship in a way, to be able to work with a lab that knows how to process well. Um, and so having that experience obviously was slow moving, and I knew that I still wanted to keep film for a lot of like my personal work. There's a project I have about my siblings, um, and so a lot of my film, like I really prefer to use for that now, just because it's pretty consistent with what's been shot so far. But I am folding the M11 into it some.
Mm.
Um, for me, especially being a place where there's a lot of open light, even in the wintertime, because there's very little mountains, very little dynamic landscapes. Um, it's not difficult to shoot film out here. But what I did notice was that having a single M camera, um, and the pace of film, as much as it made me contemplative and good at shooting that, I really felt like I was almost like losing muscle memory shooting
Mm,
fast. And I
yeah.
don't know if you know what I mean by that. You
Yeah.
probably get what I mean. Um, but they're very different mediums,
Yeah.
even though they're very similar tools. And my life has always had this kind of theme of alignment or balance, with my day job and creativity, with writing, photography. I've always been a person that's tried to make sure that there's an equal opposite, and that I can pace in both ways and work in both ways at the same time. That's always been big for me. So daily carry now is I leave my M6 at the house. I take my M11, and that's usually what's in my work bag, just because uh, it's just got a different shutter range. It's obviously got more ISO range, and because of the relationship I have with film, I think I really want to preserve that more for family work and for some other projects that are like medium specific.
Is that the
So,
Blood series that you posted about recently?
yeah, I think
Nice.
that that's a project that will have some photos that are different mediums, just because I've been taking photos of them for years.
Hmm.
But I think the majority of it will be film,
Nice.
uh, mostly because I want to have as many negatives of that as possible.
Yes.
I'd really like to keep that. And then to the point we talked about it earlier about finding voice and things like that, uh, I do feel that I have a consistent look and energy to my photos, but I'm at a point now where I'm really fleshing out what it looks like to be somebody that's making specific gear choices for each project, and
Mm.
what it looks like to actually have pretty distinct, chapters that feel like their own. Um, and that's the sort of next terrain for me, like as a photographer. At least the next thing I need to walk through uh, is not just knowing what the letters of the alphabet are, but actually knowing how to structure the sentences. And then beyond that, like actually knowing the context, of what that's trying to say.
Yeah.
And I think medium is never going to be the message. But I do think that consistent medium for a project really helps simplify what you're trying to communicate.
Yeah. Even to
Um,
the choice of
so yeah,
lens. At the end of the day, that's something that was it Dave Herring? I forgot who told me that on the show, but um, I was Eclav, Danny Eclav. Anyway, so he told me that 35 was his main lens because he created a whole body of work with it, and he knows it by the back of his hand. But not only that, the consistency in which he captures whether a person or an object is, throughout his whole body of work. And again, we all have multiple lenses, and I invite everybody to
mhm.
shoot all the lenses they have. But if you find something that really resonates with you, just as the camera, to your point, will bring you a certain type of, you know, emotion, but also rendering when it comes to the output and what you're
Mhm.
trying to say and what projects you're working on. The lens is also something that, so I'll end the gear talk with that. So 35, 50, 28, what's your go-to?
28, 35, 50 in that order.
Well, there you go. So that's I think we have the
Yep.
same the same appreciation for those lenses, and we're actually nearing the end of the show. But before we go, I wanna ask you about the project that you're working on. I know you don't want to reveal too much, but you are working on big things, and maybe you want to share just a glimpse of what you have in mind for what Dean will be doing for the next couple months and years.
Yeah. So I am currently spending a lot of time and energy and gallery show formats,
Nice.
and how I would like for that to look, for reasons that are probably obvious by saying that, but that is something that I've considered, and it is something I'm now actively working towards bringing into the real world. I've been notoriously bad at selling prints online, and some of that is just because there have been some online platforms that have been great for convenience, but um, I've always had a really deep emotional connection to my photos, and I kind of got to a place a couple years ago where I was like, I don't want like a photo ATM where I'm just randomly printing these off. I have nothing against like free art or people that do that. There are some great people that take that direction. But for me, I know, because of the fact that I'm curious and my sights are set on that now, that I need to explore it just for my own sanity. And I need to kind of walk through what it looks like to be more of a formal artist. Um, so I am looking into that. There will probably be some announcements for that at some point in the future, one closer than the others, but I'm not going to say anything until it's actually set in stone and I've got the yeses in writing. So people can look forward to hearing something about that. Um, but beyond that exploration, I also have been, uh, to my point about projects, really looking at how the work I'm producing can also be in a book format and walking through what it looks like to publish is absolutely a nightmare. I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
sugarcoat it for anybody.
Yep.
That's its own beast. But finding practical ways to bring art into people's houses is just something that's been important to me for a while. And I don't really think it's so much of an ego thing or a legacy thing. I definitely feel like that was probably a piece of it when I first started digging into it. Like, oh, like if I'm taking pictures, they need to matter, and if they matter, then people need to have them, and like that's very logical. But I think more than that, like um, I'm I'm less interested in I guess being famous and more interested in preserving what I've done
Yeah.
just because it matters to me. And that's actually pretty selfish to say, but it's they to a certain degree, it's almost like having something that I caretake, that I look over, and
Well,
there's a part of me that wants it to last. Um,
if not, then why are we doing this? Like to
exactly.
have hard drives filled with images that we
Yep.
look at once in the blue moon. Like I completely agree with you, and that's why on my side I produce these these zines, and to your own
Yep.
point, um, not always 110% satisfied with the printed quality, but at least some people are looking at my work in a different format than a freaking
Mhm.
algorithm driven platform on a screen, on a glass screen. So I completely agree with you. And when you do that exhibition, we'll make sure to promote it on our platform. You'll have to come back on the show to let us know how it
Dude.
went, the process. I know our friend Bob Patterson from Street Photography Magazine, who just put out that book that I'm actually part of, and I'm very, very proud to be part of. But he said it was, if you think it was hell, it was even more hell than you think. It was to produce a damn book. Like, it's so hard. And of course, if you are not familiar with the process of creating a book, so I wish you the best of luck, my friend Dean, for that endeavor. And of course, when you do have something out, let us know. We'll promote it. And in the meantime, before you have a book, exhibitions, and you're world famous, where can people find you?
So you can find me on Instagram. Dean_Hinnant is my handle. I do have a website. There's a link in my bio for all that. So you can look through there for any other information you want. But if you ever want to talk photography, feel free to message me. I'm always responsive, but I don't reply like right away because I am doing a lot. So yeah.
Well, Dean, it was a pleasure talking to you, and I'm sure this is the first conversation of many. And if you guys enjoyed the conversation, please make sure to rate 5-star on the platform of your choice, whether Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you are listening to those podcasts. I've been Fred Ranger. Please be happy, enjoy life, and enjoy your Leica gear, or whatever gear you have. Cheers.